The eviction notice felt like a physical blow, the paper thin and flimsy in my trembling hands, yet carrying the weight of my entire world crashing down. The laughter echoing from inside, their drunken cheers a mocking soundtrack to my despair as I stood on the porch, belongings scattered around me like fallen leaves after a storm. They truly believed they had won. They thought they had finally broken Scarlet, silenced her for good, unaware that their cruelty was only fueling a fire that would soon consume them all. If you have a sister who would stand by you through anything, subscribe now. My life in Albuquerque had been simple, predictable even until my younger brother Ethan decided to stir the pot. I was a bartender, sure, but it was honest work and I was good at it. I was saving every penny, dreaming of opening my own place, a cozy little spot with live music and the best margaritas in the state. My parents, bless their hearts, never quite understood my ambitions. They always saw me as the wild child, the one who danced to the beat of her own drum, never quite fitting into their perfectly sculpted suburban world. Ethan, on the other hand, was their golden boy, the star athlete, the Harvard graduate, the one who could do no wrong. He returned from the East Coast, all smiles and promises of a new and improved Ethan, only to reveal his true colors masked with envy and a cruel streak I never knew existed. It all started with a seemingly innocent comment in the family group chat, a snide remark about my career choice, a thinly veiled jab at my perceived lack of ambition. But it escalated quickly, fueled by his resentment and my parents' blind faith in his every word. He painted a picture of me as some irresponsible party girl, using carefully chosen words and manipulated truths to turn them against me. The bar, he claimed, was just a front for something more sinister, my late nights spent cavorting with unsavory characters. My parents, already predisposed to distrust my lifestyle, ate it up hook, line, and sinker. The final blow came swiftly and without warning. One morning I woke up to text from my mother, informing me that I was no longer welcome in their home, that my lifestyle was a disgrace to the family name. Ethan, of course, played the concerned brother, feigning sympathy while secretly relishing his victory. They threw me out, their own daughter, their own flesh and crimson. With nowhere else to go, I found myself bouncing from one friend's couch to another, my savings dwindling, my dreams fading with each passing day. I tried to reason with them, to explain that Ethan was lying, that I was still the same Scarlet they had raised, but their ears were closed, their hearts hardened by his carefully crafted narrative. I stayed silent, not because I was defeated, but because I knew that fighting them head-on would be futile. I needed a plan, a strategy to expose Ethan's lies and reclaim my life, my family. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, the wound festering with each passing day as I watched Ethan bask in the glow of my parents' adoration. He had stolen my home, my family, my future, all with a few well-placed lies and a calculated manipulation of their trust. But what he didn't realize was that I was not as easily broken as he thought. I was observant, patient, and resourceful. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every lie, every carefully constructed facade he presented to the world. I knew that the truth was my greatest weapon, and I was determined to wield it with precision and unwavering resolve. I began to realize that the person I trusted most was one of them. The eviction notice wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a wrecking ball to my carefully constructed life. Every night I replayed the scene in my head, the way Ethan smirked as I packed my belongings, the triumphant glint in his eyes as he watched me walk away. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford, replaced by a relentless tide of anxiety and resentment. I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the weight of my parents' rejection crushing me. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren sounded like a reminder of my failure, a confirmation of Ethan's lies. My bartending shifts became a blur of forced smiles and robotic motions. The clinking of glasses, the boisterous laughter of the patrons, all felt like a cruel mockery of my own despair. Tips dwindled as my focus wavered, my performance suffering under the immense pressure. I knew I was on thin ice with my boss, a gruff but fair man who valued efficiency and a positive attitude. But how could I maintain a positive attitude when my entire world was crumbling around me? I tried calling my parents, desperate to reason with them to explain Ethan's manipulation, but my calls went unanswered. Each unanswered call deepened the ache in my chest, solidifying the reality that they had chosen him over me, that they believed his fabricated version of the truth. I even drove to their house one evening, hoping to catch them in person to plead my case face to face. But as I sat in my car across the street, watching the warm glow of their living room window, I saw Ethan arrive, his arm casually draped around my mother's shoulder. The sight sent a jolt of fury through me, a visceral wave of anger that threatened to consume me. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to expose Ethan's lies then and there, but I knew it would be futile. I was alone, vulnerable, and emotionally drained. Any attempt to reason with them in that state would only reinforce Ethan's narrative of me as unstable and irrational. So I swallowed my pride, turned the key in the ignition, and drove away. The image of Ethan's smug face burned into my memory. Back at the cramped apartment I was sharing with a friend, I scrolled through social media. a masochistic ritual of self-inflicted pain. Pictures of my family, seemingly happy and carefree, filled my screen, each image a fresh reminder of what I had lost. Ethan was everywhere, smiling, laughing, basking in the glow of my parents' love. He had even taken over my old room, transforming it into a state-of-the-art home office, as my mother proudly announced in one of her posts. The injustice of it all was almost unbearable. He had not only stolen my home and my family, but he was also flaunting his victory, twisting the knife with every carefully curated post. My savings were dwindling faster than I had anticipated. The cost of living in Albuquerque was higher than I remembered, and the sporadic shifts I was picking up at the bar were barely enough to cover my share of the rent and basic expenses. I started selling some of my belongings, cherished items that held sentimental value, just to make ends meet. My grandmother's antique jewelry box, my collection of vintage vinyl records, my favorite leather jacket, each sale felt like a small piece of my soul being chipped away. The weight of my financial struggles added another layer of stress to my already precarious situation. I started having panic attacks, sudden episodes of intense fear and anxiety that left me gasping for air, my heart racing, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I felt like I was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into a sea of despair with no lifeline in sight. One particularly difficult evening, after a particularly brutal shift at the bar, I came home to find an eviction notice taped to the door of the apartment I was sharing with my friend. My friend, bless her heart, had been struggling to make ends meet herself, and the unexpected financial strain of housing me had pushed her over the edge. I understood her situation, but the news was devastating nonetheless. It felt like the final nail in the coffin, the ultimate confirmation of my utter and complete failure. As I stood there on the porch, belongings scattered around me like fallen leaves after a storm, I felt a flicker of something ignite within me, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. They truly believed they had won. They thought they had finally broken Scarlett, silenced her for good, unaware that their cruelty was only fueling a fire that would soon consume them all. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows as I dragged my suitcase down the sidewalk, each clunk of the wheels a mocking reminder of my descent. I was homeless, truly homeless. The reality of it settled over me like a suffocating blanket, stealing the air from my lungs, the hope from my heart. Every car that passed felt like a judgmental stare, every closed door a symbol of my isolation. I wandered aimlessly for hours, a ghost in my own life, the city lights blurring into a hazy, indifferent backdrop. My phone was almost dead, my stomach growled with hunger, and my body ached with exhaustion. I found myself drawn to a small park on the outskirts of town, a forgotten patch of green amidst the concrete jungle. I collapsed onto a park bench, the cold metal biting into my skin, and allowed the tears to flow freely, a torrent of grief and frustration that had been building for months. I cried until my eyes were swollen, my throat raw, my body shaking with sobs. I felt utterly defeated, stripped bare, reduced to nothing. The weight of my parents' rejection, Ethan's betrayal, and my own failures pressed down on me, threatening to crush me completely. The temptation to simply give up, to succumb to the darkness, was overwhelming. What was the point of fighting? What was the point of trying when everyone I loved had turned against me? I thought about just walking away, disappearing, leaving this world behind. The thought was a chilling comfort, a release from the relentless pain. But then a memory flickered in my mind. A vision of my grandmother, her eyes twinkling with warmth and wisdom, telling me, "Scarlett, my darling, never let anyone steal your sparkle. You are stronger than you think." Her words, spoken years ago, resonated within me, a lifeline in the sea of despair. I thought of her strength, her resilience in the face of adversity, and a tiny spark of defiance ignited within me. No, I wouldn't let Ethan win. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let my dreams die. I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and straightened my back. The night air was cold, but I felt a newfound warmth spreading through my veins, a fire of determination that burned brighter than any despair. I pulled out my phone, the screen flickering with a low battery warning, and started searching for resources, for shelters, for any kind of help I could find. I spent the rest of the night huddled on that park bench, researching, planning, strategizing. The despair didn't disappear entirely, but it was now accompanied by a fierce resolve, a burning desire to reclaim my life and expose Ethan's lies. I was no longer just a victim. I was a planner, a warrior, ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. The next few weeks were a blur of soup kitchens, temporary shelters, and grueling job searches. I swallowed my pride and took any work I could find, cleaning toilets, scrubbing floors, serving coffee to impatient customers. The work was hard, the pay was meager, but it was enough to keep me afloat, to keep a roof over my head, even if it was just a shared room in a rundown hostel. I learned to navigate the city's underbelly, to rely on the kindness of strangers, to find strength in the face of adversity. I continued to document everything, every conversation, every interaction, every piece of evidence that could help me expose Ethan's lies. I spent hours in the public library, poring over legal documents, researching online, piecing together the puzzle of Ethan's deception. I discovered that his Harvard degree was nothing more than a certificate from an online course, that his successful business ventures were actually a string of failed startups funded by my parents' money. The more I dug, the more I uncovered, the more determined I became to bring him down. Their biggest weakness: they thought they were untouchable. They believed that their wealth and status would protect them from any consequences. But they were wrong. I knew their secrets, I had the evidence, and I was ready to unleash it upon them. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. I smiled, I played their game, but I was recording everything. The hostel wasn't exactly the Ritz, but it offered something invaluable: anonymity. Surrounded by transient faces and hushed whispers, I could plot my revenge without fear of prying eyes. My days were spent juggling menial jobs, but my nights were dedicated to meticulously crafting my plan. I started by focusing on the Harvard lie. It was the cornerstone of Ethan's fabricated persona, the foundation upon which his success was built. I knew that exposing it would not only shatter his image but also raise serious questions about his credibility in all other areas of his life. I discreetly contacted Harvard University, posing as a potential employer conducting a background check. I provided Ethan's name, date of birth, and the supposed degree he had obtained. The response was swift and decisive: no record of Ethan attending the university, let alone graduating. I had my smoking gun. Next, I turned my attention to his successful business ventures. This was a more complex undertaking, as it involved sifting through financial records and legal documents. I spent countless hours at the library, using their computers to access public databases and research Ethan's companies. I discovered a pattern of shady dealings, inflated valuations, and outright fraud. He had been using my parents' money to prop up these failing ventures, disguising his failures with clever accounting tricks and misleading statements. One close call sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was at the library, deeply engrossed in my research, when I felt a presence behind me. I glanced up and saw a familiar face: Sarah, one of Ethan's close friends. She worked at the front desk and had always been friendly to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was now suspicious of my activities. "Scarlett, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. I quickly closed the laptop screen, my heart pounding in my chest. "Just doing some research for a new business idea," I stammered, hoping she would buy my lie. She raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Really? What kind of business?" I struggled to come up with a plausible answer. A mobile bartending service," I said, grasping at straws. "That's interesting," she said slowly, her eyes scanning my face. "Well, good luck with that." She turned and walked away, but I could feel her gaze lingering on me. I knew I had to be more careful. Ethan's network of friends and acquaintances was vast, and any one of them could inadvertently reveal my plans. I started using a VPN to mask my IP address and encrypt my online activity. I also created a separate email account and social media profile under a false name to avoid detection. I needed concrete evidence, something irrefutable that would expose Ethan's lies to the world. I decided to focus on his financial fraud, as it was the most easily provable and had the potential to land him in serious legal trouble. I knew that he had been using a shell corporation to funnel money from my parents' accounts into his own personal accounts. I needed to find the documents that would prove this. I remembered that my mother kept meticulous records of all their financial transactions, storing them on her computer in a password-protected folder. Getting access to that computer would be a challenge, but I knew it was essential to my plan. I started observing my parents' routine, noting their comings and goings, their habits, their security measures. I discovered that my mother had a tendency to leave her computer unlocked when she stepped away from her desk, even if it was just for a few minutes. This was my opportunity. I knew I would only have a limited amount of time, so I needed to be prepared. I purchased a small USB drive and downloaded a keylogger program onto it. A keylogger would record every keystroke entered on the computer, including passwords and sensitive information. I also installed a remote access tool that would allow me to access the computer from anywhere in the world. One afternoon, I saw my parents leave the house to attend a charity gala. This was my chance. I waited an hour to make sure they were gone and then drove to their house. I parked down the street and approached the house cautiously, checking to see if anyone was watching. The coast was clear. I slipped into the backyard and found the spare key hidden under a flower pot, just as I had suspected. I unlocked the back door and quietly entered the house. The house was silent, the air thick with the scent of lavender and potpourri. I made my way to my mother's office and found her computer sitting on her desk, just as I had hoped. The screen was on, but the computer was locked. I quickly plugged in the USB drive and ran the keylogger program. It installed silently in the background, undetectable to the average user. I then waited for my mother to return and enter her password. A few hours later, I received an email notification. The keylogger had captured the password. I now had access to my mother's computer. I logged in remotely and started searching for the financial records. It took me hours to sift through the mountains of files, but finally I found what I was looking for, a folder labeled Private Finances. Inside, I found a treasure trove of documents including bank statements, tax returns, and wire transfer records. The documents clearly showed that Ethan had been systematically transferring money from my parents' accounts into his own shell corporation. The evidence was irrefutable. I downloaded all the documents onto my encrypted hard drive, knowing that this information would be enough to expose Ethan's lies and bring him to justice. But I wasn't finished yet. I wanted to make sure that my parents understood the full extent of Ethan's betrayal. I decided to create a video presentation, outlining his fraudulent activities and presenting the evidence in a clear and concise manner. I spent days editing the video, adding voiceovers, graphics, and annotations to make it as compelling as possible. I wanted to make sure that my parents couldn't deny the truth, that they couldn't continue to believe Ethan's lies. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew that exposing Ethan would be a risky move, that it could have serious consequences for everyone involved, but I was determined to see it through. I had come too far, sacrificed too much to back down now. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. I meticulously reviewed the video, ensuring every detail was perfect, every piece of evidence irrefutable. My voice trembled slightly as I recorded the narration, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, about reclaiming my life from the ashes of Ethan's lies. I knew that once I released this video, there would be no turning back. The fallout would be immense and lives would be irrevocably changed. But I couldn't allow fear to paralyze me. I had come too far to falter now. I uploaded the video to a private YouTube channel, setting it to unlisted so that only those with the link could view it. I then composed an email to my parents, attaching the link and writing a brief message. Mom and Dad, please watch this before you make any further decisions about Ethan. The truth is in here. My finger hovered over the send button, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment of reckoning. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and clicked send. I waited anxiously for their response, packing back and forth in my tiny hostel room. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Hours passed and still no reply. I started to doubt myself. Had I made a mistake? Would they simply dismiss the video as a fabrication, a desperate attempt to sabotage Ethan? Or worse, would they believe him over me, siding with the man who had so skillfully manipulated them for so long? The uncertainty was agonizing. Finally, late that night, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my mother. My hands trembled as I opened it. The subject line read simply, Scarlett. The body of the email was even shorter. We need to talk, come home. The words were devoid of emotion, but I could sense the gravity of the situation. They had watched the video. They knew. Returning to my parents' house felt surreal, like stepping back into a life that no longer belonged to me. The opulent surroundings, once a symbol of comfort and security, now felt like a gilded cage, a reminder of the privilege and wealth that had blinded them to Ethan's true nature. My parents were waiting for me in the living room, their faces etched with a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling slightly. Scarlett, is this true? She asked, gesturing to the laptop on the coffee table where the video was paused on a particularly damning piece of evidence. I nodded, my gaze unwavering. Every word, I said. My father stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. How dare you accuse Ethan of these things, he roared. He's like a son to us. A son who has been stealing from you for years, I retorted, my voice rising to match his. The evidence is all there, Dad. Look at the bank statements, the wire transfers, the shell corporations. It's all right there in black and white. The argument escalated quickly, devolving into a shouting match filled with accusations, denials, and recriminations. My parents refused to believe me, clinging to their image of Ethan as the perfect son-in-law, the successful businessman, the charming and generous friend. They accused me of being jealous, bitter, and vindictive, claiming that I was simply trying to destroy Ethan out of spite. I tried to reason with them, to show them the evidence, to appeal to their sense of justice, but it was no use. They were blinded by their own preconceived notions, their own desire to believe in the lie. Finally, exhausted and defeated, I gave up. I can't make you believe me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But the truth is out there, and sooner or later it will come to light. I turned to leave, but my mother stopped me. Scarlett, she said, her voice softening slightly. If what you say is true, if Ethan really has been deceiving us, then we need to know for sure. We need proof. That was all I needed. There's a meeting tomorrow. Ethan is pitching a new investment opportunity, I explained. He needs your money to close the deal. I suggest you record the conversation, ask the right questions. A plan began to solidify. My parents, now suspicious but not entirely convinced, agreed to my suggestion. I knew this was my chance to expose Ethan once and for all, to trap him in his own web of lies. The next day my parents went to the meeting, equipped with a hidden camera and a recording device. I waited anxiously at the hostel, packing back and forth, my nerves on edge. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, late in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. We got him, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. He confessed everything. The satisfaction was overwhelming. Ethan's lies were about to unravel and his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around him. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The audio recording was damning. Ethan, caught completely off guard, had confessed to everything. The fake Harvard degree, the sham businesses, the systematic draining of my parents' accounts. He'd even bragged about how easily he'd manipulated them, how they'd believed every lie he'd spun. As my parents listened to the recording again, the reality of his betrayal washed over them. The anger in their eyes shifted to something else, a deep, profound sadness. They had invested not just their money, but their trust and affection in a man who had seen them only as marks. The next morning I watched as my father, his face grim, contacted the authorities. He handed over all the evidence, the audio recording, the financial documents, the video presentation I had created. Ethan was arrested that afternoon. The news spread like wildfire. Suddenly the golden boy was exposed as a fraud. His reputation, once so carefully cultivated, crumbled overnight. Investors pulled out of his ventures, his friends deserted him, and his name became synonymous with deceit. I saw a picture of him being escorted by police. His face was ashen, his eyes hollow. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a look of utter despair. He looked small, insignificant, broken. The trial was a media frenzy. Every detail of Ethan's deception was dissected and analyzed, splashed across headlines and broadcast on television. My parents testified, their voices filled with pain and regret. I also took the stand, recounting my story, exposing the years of manipulation and deceit I had endured. The courtroom was packed with reporters, investors, and former friends of Ethan, all eager to witness his downfall. He tried to defend himself, to deny the evidence, but it was no use. The truth was too overwhelming, too undeniable. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a guilty verdict. Ethan was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his future irrevocably altered. The fallout was immense. My parents were devastated, not only by the financial losses but also by the emotional toll of Ethan's betrayal. It took them a long time to heal, to rebuild their lives and their trust. But in the end, they emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. As for Ethan, he lost everything. His freedom, his reputation, his wealth, his friends, his family. He was stripped of everything he had gained through his lies and deceit. He became a pariah, shunned by society, a cautionary tale of greed and ambition gone wrong. They lost everything. I just smiled. I moved on with my life, leaving the past behind me. I started a new business, one built on honesty and integrity. I surrounded myself with people I could trust, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I had. I learned a valuable lesson, that true success comes not from wealth or status, but from living an authentic and meaningful life. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Sometimes it's the only way to reclaim what was stolen from you, to right the wrongs that have been committed against you. It's not about seeking pleasure in someone else's pain, but about restoring balance and justice to the world. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.